This is my first fly-in, so I didn't get to meet a lot of you before, and I'm a little embarrassed giving this talk because I think you guys probably know a whole lot more about this subject than I do. I'm not sure why Christina picked me, but she did. Or I was down the list for the rest of you who said no. I think that, you know, I'm approaching this from a couple different things. I learned a whole lot trying to do some research. I talked to 5 or 6 other photographers that I've flown with through the years, and you know, what was a good flight, what was a bad flight, and I tried to put something together that covered some of that. I would really like it at the end of this thing if I can get some stuff that you guys have picked up. I've been doing this, like I said, for about 3 years with LightHawk, but I somehow think there's a whole lot more experience out there than mine. Let's see if this works. I titled this Pilot and Photographer Collaboration, and I think it was funny because I talked to all of these, every photographer I talked to, this was the #1 thing that came up that they said was important, and something that in the flights that they've done, we've had various degrees of success with. So I think that's why I ended up titling it that. What was the most important thing that we can do to ensure that we get a successful shot? A safe operating environment. And I mean, we're all pilots here, and I think that everyone knows that's their primary mission, but sometimes when you're taking a photographer up or a non-flying person, you forget that they're really counting on you to keep them safe. And they may ask you to do things that aren't safe, and you need to be able to tell them that they're not safe. I mean, I know you want to get that shot of that river down there, but I can't go underneath that bridge to do it. Kind of a thing. I'm going to cover these pretty quick. As pilot in command, you best understand the regulations, safety issues, and bottom line, you're responsible for the photographer, the aircraft, and the people on the ground. And I didn't put this on here, but this is probably as important, particularly with this group. You also have responsibility to LightHawk, the organization that we're in here. Nobody, you know, wants to be the guy that LightHawk took this guy up. We made him sick. He'll never fly again, and that reflects on the whole organization. Are you prepared, and are the aircraft prepared for the flight? Is the weather legal? And not only legal, but it's within your personal minimums, and does it allow you to complete the mission? I talked to Dan last night, and we were talking a little bit about some of the missions he's done, and he brought up that he had an early morning flight, so he came over the night before to do this flight and relocate. Met the folks in the morning, but it was blowing really bad. And one of the things he was doing was taking a tribal member up who had never been up in a small plane before with a photographer. Now the photography wouldn't have gone real well, but it certainly wouldn't have done well with a new person, and he chose to hold off. So there's nothing wrong certainly with doing that, and certainly from the standpoint of weather. I mean, if it's not there, it's not there. You're not going to be able to get that shot always. Photo flights, low altitude, slow speeds, lots of distraction. In my plane, I've got a 182. I've got the window open most of the time when they're taking it out, so you've got a lot of wind blowing through there, and they're putting their mic down there, and you know, usually they're scrunching up to get a picture, so they're bumping me as we're going along. So these are things you just need to be aware of. And risk. Make the assessment. If it's too risky, and there's nothing we should do, in my mind anyways, any mission I do with LightHawk, that is really everything should be low risk. If I'm feeling not comfortable with it, you need to say no. We all know the FARs here, but I just want to go through them real quick here, make sure everybody remembers them. The first catch-all one, if you do anything wrong, we got you. Careless, reckless operation. And if you're going to be doing some banking and high turns, you're trying to take some of these shots, you've got to be aware of that. Minimum safe altitudes. You got to be able to land somewhere without injuring anybody on the ground, undue hazard, over congested areas 1,000 feet, and over other than congested areas 500 feet above the surface, unless you're in open, over open water. But you have to be avoiding anything that's around on the ground also. So if it's populated, that doesn't count. This one, when we're in charted areas, most of the area I fly in Washington are charted areas. So I really have to be staying 2,000 feet above based on the FARs. And you can see that, if you remember your flight train, the little dotted line areas are representing those areas to go through. I bring this one up because I did a flight over in that area and was going along, and it dawned on me as they were asking, if can we get lower, 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 that I really shouldn't be doing that. Initial flight preparations, these are some that I kind of like to do. Study the route for terrain hazards. What's the highest thing around what I'm going to be flying? You should know that number just to be safe. Over water, some of you guys are a little bolder than I am. I like to be within gliding distance of shore if we are to go down. So that's something I bear in mind on how far I'm willing to go offshore and at what altitude that's going to be. If something does go awry, what are my choices for landing? And this doesn't have to be with a specific spot, but am I going to go north, south of the area I'm taking a picture of, whatever. Again, what is the height of the highest terrain around me? Google it. There's a lot of flights that I've done in the North Cascades where people have said they're going to look at these specific areas. I do it in advance. I do the flight above them. This is what this is going to look like when I fly over it, so you can see it. It gives them a whole lot more confidence as you're flying along. If they say, "What's the name of that lake over there?" and you go, yeah.
Small lake.
Yeah, small lake. So it's not a bad thing to do. Airspace, again, if you're in controlled airspace, and I bring this stuff up, I know that a lot of this you may not think is directly related to photography, but a lot of the flights that I've done, when I was thinking of LightHawk, I'm going to be flying over the mountains, but a lot of mine involve taking off from downtown Seattle, basically, flying along the Duwamish River, which is right next door to SeaTac. So I usually give them a call. If someone's going to do that photo mission, this is what I want to try to do. Can you work with me on that? Not a bad. I've also done that up in Vancouver. There's a lot of flights that for some reason people want to go up the Fraser River, which goes right by the International Airport up there. This was a big one. Talk to the photographer and get his objectives for the flight. They all mention this one. When we get our brief and so this is where our flight plan is going to go, we all digitally go in, we stick that in ForeFlight. This is my route, and I look at it and say, it's going to be 45 minutes of flying. But you have to understand what the photographer is going to look for, because in a lot of cases, he's going to want different angles, and you could probably double the amount of time you're going to be over that area. I think it also helps a little bit with understanding what their expertise are. I don't know about most of you guys, but I've done flights that are supposed to be with a photographer, that's showing up with his iPhone, which takes a little bit different, technique. Any altitude or airspace restrictions you may feel impact the flight? What altitudes is he looking for? I'm going to show you some pictures later on. We were flying over the Cascades, and we wanted to be as low as we could above ground level, but he also wanted to be up to 15,000 feet to get an overall picture. So it's good to know that. What's during the best time of day to take the flight? During the summer, people talk about the golden hour, usually in early morning, later evening. And it usually works better, it's a little smoother air at that time also. However, that can vary during the time of the year. Another rookie mistake on my side, we were supposed to shoot in the North Cascades. I talked to a photographer who we were going up, wasn't that experienced of a photographer, but I said, well, it's probably best to go in the early morning. Unfortunately, this was in the winter, and he was taking a picture at the bottom of one of the canyons over there. So we were basically looking at a black hole until about noon. So that doesn't always work. Oops. I did something. It looked very similar to this. Talk about the cockpit environment, any space limitations. I don't know if any of you guys have flown people that have the gyro rigs for their cameras. They show up in a 182, and I'm looking at this 300-pound monster that's supposed to be in the front seat with them. That can be an issue. Also, mentioned gloves, dressing warmly. One of the flights I took was up along basically from Vancouver all up to Campbell River, and there was a photographer taking pictures of the shoreline with a high-speed camera all the way up, just using his finger. And the guy in the back, that it was kind of like I was thinking of a military operation where they had to reload, because he would just load me, and the guy give me another camera. And he was wearing a neoprene glove, and he was actually standing on my seat on his knees, with his back to me, doing this all the way up. And even with that glove on, his fingers were getting cold. So just something to bear in mind. Again, is the weather adequate? TFRs. We have a lot of forest fires, as you pointed out earlier. We canceled actually a flight we were supposed to take with her because of that. Smoke can be an issue. Most of the folks that we fly may not understand that, that we can't go flying through some of those areas. Again, review the flight plan. Does it meet what the photographer wants? Do you understand what the photographer is trying to shoot? This is a big one, clear, concise directions. And this is one that I probably didn't used to do as well. Do that on the ground. Tell me if you want to go left, you want to go right. I found it's usually simpler than having to try to remember port, starboard. Sometimes it helps if you go 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, that can work. But whatever you come up with, cover that stuff on the ground. Because if you have the window open and you're up in the air trying to shoot, you're trying to fly, that's not the time to figure out how you're going to communicate with the guy. Make sure the photographer's gear is secured and not interfering with the flight controls. 5 minutes, thank you. Every flight I've gone on, the photographer has immediately unloaded his camera and stuck his flight bag down on the rudder pedals. I don't know if it's in their code, but that's just what happens. So bear that in mind. Also, if they got a lens hood on their camera, not usually a good idea. I've lost 2 of them. I haven't. The photographer has, as they stuck their lens out the window of the airplane and it flies right off. Nothing loose in the cabin. Again, you've got windows open, you got all kinds of stuff flying out the doors. Clean the windows if you're not shooting through a window before you take off. I take a stop off on my airplane. It's a little thing on the side. If you take that off, if you're going along, it's an old trick basically, and you hit the slipstream, the window will just stay above the wing, and they can shoot out without having to hold it. Or if you got to take a door off. If they're getting near the window, it's going to pick up on the mic. Usually helps if they put the mic behind their ear. Slow the airplane down. I was talking to one of the photographers, and he said that He considers this the equivalent of trying to shoot high school sports. It's moving very fast. The slower you can get it, the better off you're going to be in most cases. For me, I'm at 182. I usually do 10 degrees of flaps and try to do 70 knots. It will also decrease the stall speed, which is going to be your friend. And then start shooting. Again, at this point, I'm going to ask, where am I going to go if something goes wrong? Which direction? You're going to be orbiting the area most likely, slowing the aircraft down so you can get the good shot. Probably going to have the nose pitched up a little bit. You're going to be banking. Remember, your stall speeds are going to be affected at that point. And it's also, as you overbank, just to get the right angles. He's saying more and more and more. You got to understand what you're supposed to be flying the airplane, not taking the picture. I sometimes will go in a slip, which also helps. As I mentioned earlier in one of these points, you're usually shooting to the back and down is what most of my guys have done. Again, he may lean against you. I've had the guys that I think are more professional on the side are going to be up trying to get as high as they can, and just be prepared for that. In order to get the best shot, it's multiple passes. This is a picture of the same mountain up here. This Flag Mountain outside of Winthrop, Washington. They want to turn that mountain into a copper mine. So when I went up with the photographer, we went down low, then we went high. We probably went around that mountain for a good hour and a half, trying to get different angles that he wanted. This copper mine picture is about 40 miles north of this area. After we got done with the flight, getting the pictures that he wanted, we started talking on the ground about what a copper mine looked like. I said, I'd never seen one before, and he hadn't. And he said, well, this is really the group that wants to do this down to the Met House. So we flew up to look at this. She mentioned the blue water on the side, and until you've flown over one of these things, it's amazing, because it literally, they take a mountain and it becomes a deep hole in the ground. And he took some of these shots. It ended up, the organization used more of these than they did the shots we took of the Met House. And it was more powerful to them to get their message out. So that was where the collaboration part comes in. You can really end up getting something better after you get on site. And it may be different, which is what he pointed out. You may end up shooting something you didn't plan on shooting. That's the inside shot of that. Those little trucks that you see down there are actually about 15 feet tall and 40 feet long. So that was the tailing pond on the other side. This is the tailings coming off. This was actually kind of a cool shot. I'm not sure why I just put it in there because I liked it. But a mosaic. And this was another one. Didn't plan on taking, but it worked out. This was the Elwell River. We took a dam out, I think 5 or 6 years ago. And that was what came out. That was another example when we first started flying. He wanted to go lower, 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 and then he said, I'm really not getting what I want. And I said, well, why don't we try getting a little higher? And that's the kind of stuff that you I think that's about it. This was the part of the coastal picture. A couple of those. And I think that's it. Does anybody else have anything that they do that works?
Got time for about 2 things.
Okay.
You know what I've done on my 182, because when you undo that hinge restrictor and it'll ride up along in the airstream and hold it up. But I put little those sort of little clear plastic dots on the window. So instead of the window actually rubbing against or hitting your wing, they'll hit those little like bumper dots, and that's helpful.
And that's a good point I didn't mention here. So if you're going to do this and haven't done it before, make sure they hold the window.
Yeah,
And
and
don't hold it bounces off the bottom of it.
well, not only that, we had a flight school plane that the leading edge hinge broke when somebody opened a window in flight improperly, and it nearly parted the aircraft, which would not have been good. So,
They make a front window clip. I've got a 170B, but it would work on a 182 or 180 or 185. But, so you lift the window up, and then that clip comes down and locks it in that position.
Anybody has the STC for that, or no?
I just put it on.
Two quick ones. One, congested area, it's not defined in the FARs, but the FAA has defined it in pilot enforcement actions as 4 houses within a quarter mile, 10 people standing on a ramp, and a traffic jam.
Wow.
So when you're dealing with when you're thinking about altitudes, if there are a few houses considered a congested area, and everybody's got cell phone cameras, and they'll get angry and turn you into the FAA if you're low. And the other, just a suggestion, a cameraman taught me, professional cameramen that are used to shooting through a viewfinder on the ground, the first time they're in an airplane, they often will make themselves sick because they don't pull off of the viewfinder every once in a while. So suggest to them that after 30 seconds or something, looking through the viewfinder, look away.
I just wanted to pass a little anecdote. You mentioned that photographers want you to fly various directions and heights and back and forth and so forth, and I think that's true of all our flights. I flew one not too awfully long ago, and when we got finished, I asked him how many pictures he'd taken. He said 2,200. And well, where do you go from here? And he says, well, tonight I'm going to spend the night in the motel room selecting the 3 that I'm going to give to my client.
All right, we have time for one more. I just walked by the cookies in the back, and they smell really good. You don't want to miss them.
Well, I don't have an opening window, but I do have pretty clear glass, and as a result, I've had really excellent success with the photographer staying inside the airplane along with everything else that he's carrying. But the other thing I would suggest is that often they have a fairly coarse knurl on the front end of the sunshade, and that can really scratch the window. So the first thing I do is either ask them to put something over that or to keep it away from the window, because it will really make a mess of things.
All right. Thanks, Wayne, for sharing that.